Ewan,
Hello.
what is the first game you fell in love with?
Oh, I'm feeling romantic today, Joe, because I get to talk about The Simpsons Hit and Run.
Oh, yeah, he does.
A game that is burned into the fabric of my DNA. Now, I've been playing games since I was but a wee lad. I had a Dreamcast that I adored, but I also had a lot of fun, on the old desktop and stuff. And Virtual Springfield is another one that was like a formative experience for me, and just, great memories of that. But Simpsons Hit and Run was the first game that I remember being obsessed with. Like, there have been a few that have come out before, like the Spider-Man movie tie-in game, and then Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004, so after Hit and Run. But I remember Hit and Run coming out, and it was like the big thing at school. Like, I was 7 in 2003, so this is primary school, and everyone was like, The Simpsons, and everyone was quoting like I Am Evil Homer, all the things, like all the trailers and stuff, and I just, I adore this game. It's etched into my brain. I still play it like fairly regularly. The soundtrack is constantly reverberating. The monkey bit, Monkey See, Monkey Do with Dr. Nick, and it's like come on, everyone. But yeah, so Simpsons Hit and Run, the first game that I fell in love with, and it still has my heart to this day. They should just re-release it. I don't care about a remake or a remaster because of the state nature of the graphics. It still looks fantastic. Just get it out on platforms again. All this rights bungling stuff that is preventing us from rediscovering and replaying these beloved childhood classics. It's just very annoying because I love Hit and Run, and yeah, it's great.
Got the money, just make it work.
Exactly. So, yeah, perfectly cromulent game. Sai,
Hello.
which video game did you first fall in love with?
I'm going to go with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I've been playing games since I can remember. Before that, even, really, or at least watching video games when I was really little. I don't remember what my first exposure to video games was. I know we had a Commodore 64. I remember begging my dad, can you play the Turtles video game so I can watch? Because I'm too young to understand how to turn it on, let alone play it. But Sonic 2, same thing as that. I don't remember getting it. I don't remember first playing it. But that was definitely the first game that had a massive impact on me. I was a Sonic fan. I'm still a Sonic fan, but I was obsessed with it as a kid. I was one of those running around the playground, all that stuff, doing what's called the Naruto run these days. But back then was the Sonic run, and yeah, I mean, it's crazy because when I think back on it, a strong memory of that game. Weirdly, I cried the first time I finished it. I finished my first ever video game, and it was just before school as well. It's such a weird memory. I was like, I don't know why, but that's the thing. And now,
power.
Yeah, exactly. It's the beginning. I found my purpose, and yeah, now I can bash through it in 45 minutes. Just, funnily enough, don't cry anymore. But it's a great time. It's just so satisfying to play. The music's perfect. It's one of gaming's just flawless soundtracks, isn't it? And it's arguably the game that made Sega leapfrog over Nintendo for a while, for very good reason. Yeah, loved it then, love it now.
The second one with the chemical plant.
Yes.
That game. I can't get past the chemical plant.
What's he saying?
I had kids coming up to me, and I was, that nerdy kid. Nobody ever spoke to me in school, but I had people who would not normally speak to me coming up to me in the playground, being like, "How do you beat level 4 in Sonic the Hedgehog?" First of all, it's Zone 2, Act 2.
Scar.
Hi.
Which video game?
Which video game? Well, I'm an old ass man, so I go all the way back to. I also had a friend who had a Commodore 64, so I remember those days very well. The first game that I bought was Alex Kidd and stuff like that on the Master System. It was one of those things where my friend John Wofford from 1975, by chance, he had a Mega Drive, which I didn't know the difference.
Name drop.
We grew up together, and so we would always play Sonic and everything else over his house. He had a Mega Drive. I didn't know the difference between the two. I went to buy a Mega Drive and ended up coming home with a Master System, not knowing the difference between the two. So my first games back then were the Master System versions of Shinobi and Sonic. So I'm still a Sonic fan to this day. I love the little blue dude very, very much. But I will also just shout out Shinobi. I did manage to get a Mega Drive soon after, and Revenge of Shinobi's music is incredible. That whole era for Sega, they were just absolute bangers, mainly because they had better sound chips or whatever that were on the market in general at the time. But yeah, that whole sort of very, very late 80s. I mean, I was born in 89, but it was still the hangover of that for the beginning of the 90s. That mix of Sonic and Shinobi and Alex Kidd was just a hell of a trio to build the pillars of what would make my gaming taste going forward. Also still brilliant. Bring Shinobi back. Where is he, Ewan? What have you done with him?
Right, Adam, which video game, because love's in the air, Which video game did you first fall in love with?
Alright, so I'm going to go with one choice here, and it isn't the first game I played that I fell in love with, but it's one that made me appreciate games in a different way. So the first game I'm kind of giving an honourable mention to, it would be Resident Evil 2. That would be one of the best games I've ever played. I fell in love with the franchise then, and I adore the Resident Evil franchise. Like, I'm a big fan. But the game I am going with in this one is a little game called Neverwinter Nights.
Vintage choice.
I know, right? Back in 2002. So, like, obviously, BioWare. This is when, for me, they were at their peak. They were, like, the masters of storytelling, right? And, you know, we can go on about BioWare, all the ups, all the downs. But this, for me, is when they were, like, firing off on all cylinders, basically. We're just fresh off the back of, like, Baldur's Gate 2, which are still classics. And then this game, for me, I remember my neighbor, like, loaned me a copy. He was like, you have to play this game. I know, howdy, neighbor. Back when you could, right? Before everything where you can't now just lend people games anymore. And then, yeah, like, I remember, like, installing it and everything, putting it in, and it was just the world that they created. It was the first game I, like, felt like I fell into the world. And all of the little story things, like, it made characters really matter to me in a way I'd never seen before. For example, spoiler alert for a 2002 game, but there's a character called Arabeth who starts off as the person that gives you missions, and then later on, like, as time goes on, she goes through tragedy, and then you have to fight her as a boss later on because she completely turns on all of her morals. And you kill her. But you don't kill her, because in the 2 expansion packs, which is Shadows of Undertide and Hordes of the Underdark, she comes back, you go into hell, and you can actually see her in there, and you talk to her, and it brings her back round, and she becomes one of your companions, classic BioWare style. And a game that's able to do that, at that time, it was doing stuff which we're still getting in video games now. But honestly, it looks a little dated, I know, but go back if you can. If you've never played it, go back and play it, because honestly, classic, and that is BioWare magic right there.
I'm not going to do Commander Keen, even though it was one of the first games I was obsessed with, because my uncle had it on his computer, and this was in the computer room. You know, the early 90s. The early 90s when people had a computer room.
Take me back.
Mental. I know, incredible, but I'm not going to go into that, because the bit's getting stale. But I think, you know, it could have been a Sonic game, like probably Sonic 1, or maybe Sonic on the Master System, but if I really think about it, it's got to be Streets of Rage, right? Because it's also one of the first games I ever completed. Go back to a previous chat and I will reveal that we got the bad ending. But Streets of Rage, right? You know, I never had any games consoles as a kid until the PS2, but all my friends had them, mostly Mega Drives, you know, we were Sega kids. And all of them had Streets of Rage on Mega Games 6, right? And we all had our favourite characters to play as. I was Axel. And it's just Streets of Rage 1 is still absolute perfection to me, because people will say Streets of Rage 2 is the better game. It probably is. Graphically, it's nicer. It handles a bit better. It plays a bit nicer. But Streets of Rage 1 has a purity to it, where in Streets of Rage 2, you get to the end and like you fight. You know, Mr. X turns up again. You fight him, and then it turns out he's like a robot, and it's getting stupid. You know, Streets of Rage 1 is just these 8 perfect levels, really nice little settings each time, with just a larger-than-life villain at the end. You know, one of them's got a boomerang, one of them's got like Wolverine claws, one of them's just clearly the Ultimate Warrior from WWF at the time. And we battled through it, and because, you know, with it being the first game that me and my friends ever completed, it was because we just persevered through it. We were always stuck on level 4, because those annoying guys who breathe fire are such spammers, you know. And then we got level 5 on the boat, you know, and then we got level 6 with the crushing machines, you know, and then level 7's a good gimmick level where it's vertical, you just throw guys off the elevator endlessly and it never stops being funny. But of course, the music to Streets of Rage is the real thing that sticks with me. Every single level has the most unbelievably memorable track behind it, you know, they're absolute bangers. It's not surprising that Yuzo Koshiro had them re-released on vinyl. They're perfect vinyl fodder, you know, every single one is like a really intense like house or trip hop tune. And they're all, you know, there. You can get them on like Spotify or whatever. I listen to that soundtrack regularly, because you know what, when I'm walking down the street listening to that, I'm like, hey, I could be Axel Stone here. You know, I could be walking along, I might punch that old lady. You know, I might throw her over my shoulder and then call the police to fire napalm down on the street. You know, like I'm in Streets of Rage when I hear that. I'm a gamer. You know.
Oh my god.
What was the first video game that I fell in love with? Well, we're going back a good few years now. So my first console was a PS1, and initially I didn't actually have any games for it. But funnily enough, my granddad is like a very big gamer, and he used to get these PlayStation magazines, and they used to always come with these like demo disc things. So he used to buy the magazines and give me the demo discs, and on one of them was Crash Bandicoot 2. So yeah, I used to play this demo over and over and over again, and it was actually the level where you ride on Polar and you go through the ice thing. And I played it so much that I did actually wear the demo disc out. And eventually, there's a bit of a funny story about this. I remember my mom calling my dad with some good news, and my dad came through to tell me, he was like, Dan, your mom's got some great news. And I can remember how I replied to that, and it was word for word, she's got the new Crash Bandicoot game. The new Crash Bandicoot game being Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. But no, at the time, she had actually passed her driving test, and that was the good news. But then roll around that Christmas later, I did eventually get Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped, but I never actually had the full game of Crash Bandicoot 2. I would just play this level over and over and over. And yeah, Crash Bandicoot, that was my introduction to gaming, and this was before my dad used to play Resident Evil. That's a whole other video, we'll not get into that. And if you're wondering about my granddad, he's 72 years old, and yeah, he still games. He's got a PS5, he's got a Series X, and he just loves first-person shooters, so every time a new one of those is released, he's got it day one. And it's what I aspire to be like when I'm that age. But yeah, Crash Bandicoot was the first game that I fell in love with.
Okay, I'm going last, so I can put whatever sicko I want to put on the television. And I've gone with Venom from the PlayStation 1 Spider-Man game, because honestly, I can't really remember a time when I wasn't in love with video games. And that might sound weird, but one of my earliest memories is being 4 or 5 and it's Christmas, and in the months running up to Christmas, I had watched my cousin play their PlayStation 1 and just thought it was the most mind-blowing thing ever. Immediately wanted to talk about nothing more than what I had seen, because I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And the first game that I ever played on that Christmas morning was Hercules, which I've talked about before on this channel. PlayStation 1's Hercules, and I just couldn't get it through my brain that the cartoons that I was watching on television, I could now play. I was in love with video games ever since that moment. And honestly, because of that, you could pick any iconic PlayStation 1 era game and it would either reignite the love for gaming or just kind of continue it. You know, when I picked up Spider-Man on PlayStation 1, again, could not believe what I was able to do, the freedom that you had in that game to swing from building to building, to crawl over every inch of it. Sounds nuts, would never do this now, but I would just spend afternoons in the first area, like crawling around each nook and cranny of each building, properly testing the limits of the game. I was an obsessed freak because I just loved being Spider-Man. It allowed me to be Spider-Man. So that game, Hercules, there was like a Transformers Beast Wars game. There was Batman Forever. There was a whole bunch, but it was a case of, you know, every game that I played was the best thing I had ever played. And because of that, I can't really pinpoint one thing. I guess I would just pinpoint the console itself, the PlayStation 1, and the stuff that I managed to experience on that is contributing to where I am now. It's kind of crazy that, you know, my most recent memory, turning on the camera for this video, and my earliest memory, playing Hercules on the PlayStation 1, I've not really gone far, have I? Not really gone far.